Hi students, welcome to
Lesson number 46, Part A.
Karl Marx. Karl Marx was one of the most influential social thinkers of the 19th century. He is known to the world as the Architect of Socialism and the Champion of Communism. He was a German scholar, a historian, an economist, a political scientist, a great humanitarian, and a philosopher. He committed himself to the cause of the exploited working class and declared a kind of an intellectual battle against the exploiting rich or the capitalist class. Even today, in spite of the great setback of the recent times to the Russian communism, his thoughts and the communist ideology are still alive. We consider Karl Marx as one among the pioneering sociologists because his views and thoughts have a great sociological significance. Marx founded the theory of scientific communism and enunciated the laws of dialectical and historical materialism and discovered the theory of surplus value. He is also the chief architect of the theory of class and class conflict and the theory of alienation. These have great socio-political and economic significance. The important writings of the Marx are the Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844, the German Ideology, the Poverty of Philosophy, the Communist Manifesto of 1848, and the Capital. The main objectives of this lesson are: number one, to discuss about the Marxian laws of dialectical and historical materialism. Number two, to discuss about the Marxian theory of class and class conflict. Number three, to discuss about the Marxian concepts of surplus value, classless society, and alienation. Karl Marx, Dialectical and Historical Materialism. Dialectical materialism is one of the basic principles of Marx. Dialectic literally means discussion. Dialectic is the study of contradicts, which lie at the very heart of existence. Marx learned from Hegel, the famous German thinker, the general nature of the dialectic. However, Marx objected to and rejected Hegel's idealistic interpretation. He did not approve of the Hegelian idealism. He did not agree with the Hegelian principles that external reality was a mere reflection of something within the human mind. Unlike the idealists who believed in the existence of mind, materialists like Marx and his followers thought that nature or matter existed independent of and outside the mind. According to them, matter is primary and the mind is secondary. Marx evolved the theory of philosophical materialism, according to which the world is by nature material and the different phenomena in the world are different forms of matter in movement. From this, it follows that material life of society is primary and spiritual life is secondary. The material life of society depends upon the method of securing the means of livelihood and the way of producing values. According to the argument of dialectical materialism, The opposite forces which are always present constitute the moving force of history. Marx had borrowed the concept of dialectical process from Hegel. Hegel conceived of history as dialectical process or struggle of opposites in which the dominant idea of each age assumed the role of a thesis. The thesis was soon confronted and eventually defeated by an antithesis or opposite. This contest finally resulted in the production of a synthesis which incorporated the more value elements of both thesis and antithesis. These opposite forces in the society never balance each other. On the other hand, one of them is stronger than the other. History presents the process of action and reaction between the forces. Capital, which represents one force, is the thesis, and labor is the antithesis. This leads to class struggle. Materialistic interpretation of history is another basic principle of Marxism. Marx applied the principles of dialectical materialism to the interpretation of history. As Marx has stated, economic conditions determine historical phenomena. The stage of advancement of the production, distribution and exchange of goods and organization of society resulting therefrom determine in the final analysis the political, social and cultural developments. Historical materialism is the economic interpretation of history. That is, all evolution is the result of the economic forces alone. Marx regarded the economic forces as the predominant dynamic agency of human society and its history. Essential aspects of the economic interpretation. According to Marx, the material or economic conditions are more important than the ideological or the spiritual things. He did not accept spiritualism and idealism. With this preoccupation of materialistic ideas in his mind, he declared that it is not the consciousness of the man that determines their existence, but their social existence that determines their consciousness. The form and structure of every society is determined by its economic structure. This economic structure is referred to as the infrastructure of society. This infrastructure consists of two things: A, material forces of production, and B, the indispensable relations of production. The economic infrastructure constitutes the basis on which the social, politics, religious, moral, educational, legal and other institutional network referred to as superstructure is built. The social consciousness, which includes the thoughts and philosophies of the people, is rooted in this institutional network. The forces of conflict which are associated with the historical development within the society have brought about conflict within the economic infrastructure, that is, between the forces of production and relations of production. It is through the ideological forms men become conscious of the conflict within the economic structure. The productive forces of the society determine its total conditions. The modes of production determine the character of the social, political and intellectual life in general. Changes in the system of production brings about transformation in the social, political, legal and cultural institutions. Now let us discuss about the evolution of society and modes of production. According to Marx, the nature of society and its structure depends very much on the mode of production. Marx spoke in terms of 5 stages in the development of society, which correspond to 5 consecutive modes of production. They are: number 1, primitive society and primitive mode of production; number 2, ancient society and ancient mode of production; number 3, feudal society and feudal mode of production; number 4, capitalist society and capitalist mode of production; number 5, communist society and socialist mode of production. In the primitive communist stage, there is no private property and hence the forces of production are owned by the community. In the ancient stage, there is slavery in which one class owns and exploits the members of another. Owners of the slaves and of the means of production get everything substantial, and the poor and the slaves receive very little. In the feudal stage, the classes of aristocratic landowners or feudal landlords exploit the mass of peasants or serfs. In the capitalist stage, the capitalists own all the important means of production and makes the workers wage slaves or tools. Here, the owners of wealth exploit the mass of industrial workers. In the ancient, feudal and capitalist stages, the structure of society is the result of conditions of production. Material conditions of life are so important that they determine the political and social conditions. Society develops a particular outlook owing to economic conditions. The mental attitude of the people is the product of material conditions. Religion and law are also determined by the same conditions. Society goes through these different stages to ultimately reach a stage of classless society. Each of these modes or systems is more economically productive than its predecessor, but the tensions of class conflict lead to a revolution that results in the 5th stage, that is socialism. In the communist society or the 5th stage, the mode of production is socialistic. The socialist mode of production is based on social ownership. This stage is founded when the industrial workers have finally revolted. This is the society aimed at the revolutionary overthrow of the capitalist society. So now let us discuss about the Marxian theory of social class. According to Marx, class is the manifestation of economic differentiation. A social class in Marx's term is any aggregate of persons who perform the same function in the organization of production. Class, according to Marx, is basically economic in nature, though it had great social importance. From the Marxian point of view, class is not determined by the occupation or income, but by the position an individual occupies and the function he performs in the process of production. Marx defined a class as all those people who share a common relationship to the means of economic production. Those who own and control the means of production are the slave owners, feudal land owners, or owners of property such as factories and capital, or the dominant class. Those who work for them are slaves, peasants, and industrial laborers, and are the subordinate class. The relationship between the two classes is not only one of dominance and subordination, but also of exploitation. The workers produce surplus wealth. Those who own the means of production are able to take this surplus wealth as profit for their own use. In Marx's view, this is the essence of exploitation and the main source of conflict between the classes that has occurred throughout history. Marx linked this analysis to the idea that the economic base of society influences the general character of all other aspects of culture and social structure, such as law, religion, education, and government. The dominant class is able to control all these institutions and to ensure that they protect its own interests. The laws, therefore, protect the rich, not the poor. The established religion supports the social order as it is. Education teaches the virtues of the existing system, not its vices. Government upholds the status quo rather than undermines it. Marx stressed that mere organization of production is not a sufficient condition for the development of social classes. There must also be a physical concentration of masses of people, easy communication, conflicts over economic rewards, the growth of class consciousness. From the Marxian point of view, in all stratified societies, there are two major social groups, a rich class and a poor class, or the haves and have-nots, or a ruling class and subject class. The key understanding to a given society is to discover which is the dominant mode of production within it. From a Marxian view, a class is a social group where members share the same relationships to the forces of production. Marx believed that human society evolves through different stages according to the means of production that is dominant at each stage. The first is primitive communism, in which there is no private property. The second is slavery, in which one class owns and exploits the members of another. The third of feudalism, in which a class of aristocratic landowners exploit the mass of peasants. The fourth is capitalism, in which the owners of wealth exploit the mass of industrial workers. But the tensions of class lead to a revolution that result in the fifth stage. The fifth stage is socialism, that occurs when the industrial workers have finally revolted. In the three stages, excluding the first, the labor power required for production was supplied by the subject class, that is, by slaves, serfs, and wage laborers respectively. The subject class is made up of the majority of the population, whereas the ruling or dominant class forms a minority. Marx mentions the case of the first stage, the stage of primitive communism, as the only example of a classless society. According to Marx, classes did not exist during the era of primitive communism, when the societies were based on a sort of socialist mode of production. In a hunting and food gathering stage, classes did not exist. Every member here was both producer and owner. Classes emerge only when the productive capacity of society expands beyond the level required for subsistence. Occurs in an agricultural economy where a few individuals are freed from development of a system of private property. Private property and the accumulation of surplus wealth form the basis for the development of class societies. In particular, they provide the preconditions for the emergence of a class of producers and a class of non-producers. Some are able to acquire the forces of production and others are therefore obliged to work for them. The result is a class of non-producers which owns the forces of production and a class of producers which owns only its labor power. From a Marxian perspective, the relationship between the major social classes is one of neutral dependence and conflict. Karl Marx was undoubtedly a great social thinker, profound scholar, and a prolific writer. He was an idealist who committed himself to the cause of welfare of working class. The Marxian ideas and his Communist Manifesto still remains the handbook of the revolutionaries throughout the world.